Hi there, and welcome to this online introduction to drum mixing. Now, some of this will be really obvious to a lot of you that have worked with drums before, but maybe there's some little thing that you can learn here or there. And there'll be some of you that have never even looked at mixing drums, so hopefully this is going to be really great for you and you're going to learn a few things. First of all, to give you a little bit of a background about the track we're listening to, this was actually recorded about 2 or 3 years ago at university, and the drums were played by a really good friend of mine, Solly Ezra, a really great drummer. If you've heard of a band called Talk Talk back in the 80s, he actually formed the band Talk Talk with the singer Mark Hollis. So Solly's got a great pedigree, really great guy, good drummer, and it's such a lot of fun. I bring him into the studio. We very quickly set the mics up. We go through the business. I know we did the online lecture last week about that, but we're more hands-on, obviously, in the studio. And then we'll have a little bit of a question and answer with Solly about what the drummer can bring to the recording, the importance of being able to tune the kit, like I was talking about, and replacing the heads of the drums and all this kind of thing. And also a little bit of psychology as well. As producers, it's important to get the most out of a musician. And what I really like to do as well is construct a track. So this was made just a week or two before Solly came into the studio. I just laid down this classic rock track, and I purposefully didn't want to send it to him beforehand because I wanted the students to see what goes into coaxing the best out of a musician. So I deliberately didn't send it to him beforehand. So literally we set up all the microphones, then everybody goes into the control room, and that is the first time Solly hears it. So the students get to hear the conversation, because this can be, it's not always, but it can be a real world session musician type situation where we're trying to get across what vibe we want for the song from the musician, what approach they should have, maybe some references. I think I probably told Solly anything in between Keith Moon from The Who and John Bonham from Led Zeppelin will be absolutely fine by me. And maybe just play through the songs a little bit just to highlight some tricky parts where there might be some little pushes on the toms or the cymbals or something like that. Something specific that I want. But obviously, with a good musician, you want the musician to bring what they know. You don't want to be dictating to them and just have them being some kind of a performing monkey. So you get to see that kind of conversation. We then send Solly back out into the room, put his headphones on, have a few run-throughs, 2 or 3 run-throughs, especially on those little pushy bits. And then we'll go for a take. And what you're hearing here, I believe, is sort of like the second take, something like that. Now, one thing that I can't explain is where all the different microphones went, because we would have had like 4 microphones on the kick drum and, a multitude of mics in the room and overheads. We would have had an XY pair as well as a space pair. And I can't explain why those have gone, but they have. And so just for reference, I know what some of the microphones are, but I'm not sure what some of them are. So going from the top, we would have had a Shure Beta 52. So that's what that sounds like. On the snare top, a Beyer 201, great sounding mic. Underneath the snare, an SM57. Hi-hats, an AKG 451. Now, we only have 2 toms in this setup, and they would have been Sennheiser 421s, nice rich sound on there. Overheads left and right, I cannot for the life of me remember what we had. I very much suspect that these are U87s on here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they are, but I can't put my hand on my heart. This room mic, I'm pretty sure, is a Neumann M149, the valve mic. Just a single solitary mic there. I would have also put up the stereo AEA R88 ribbon mic. For whatever reason, that didn't remain in this session. I just no idea why. Maybe these mics just sounded a load of rubbish and I took them out. I cannot remember, so I'm sorry about that. But in reality, this is probably what you're going to be given most of the time, either when you're remixing someone else's stuff or frequently, if you're recording your own things, we're quite limited by how many inputs our digital interfaces have. If you're not working in a professional studio and you don't have a gazillion microphones with, 48 channels of input digitally, so quite often we're limited to a maximum of 8 anyway. So this is probably more along the lines of what you're going to have to deal with in your day-to-day kind of mixing scenario. So it's quite good to see what you can achieve with a limited, I say limited, this is pretty much bog standard amount of microphones. So that's we've run through the microphones and the order that they are. Always remember, I said this when we were talking about the drum recording side of things, always have a think about what you're going to consider the left-hand side of the kit or the right-hand side of the kit. Are you judging it from being an audience member looking at a drummer play? Or are you judging it from being a drummer sat on the drum stool playing the kit? It actually makes no difference at all. It's just you've got to be consistent. So for whatever reason, there's no actual reason to it. Just in the beginning, I always saw myself sat on the drum stool. So the left-hand overhead microphone is the one that goes over a hi-hat if it's a right-handed drummer. So actually that's one of the first things I'm going to do, because I know this is the case. I would normally label this like that. That's the overhead for the hi-hat, and this I would name as the overhead for the ride, because then overhead left, overhead right is kind of arbitrary. If I wanted to, I could rename the file here. I'll just do one of them. Overhead, hi-hat. I'll do the other one. What the hell? Yeah, it's just to keep yourself knowing the overall picture of the kit. Quite important. One thing I didn't actually talk about last week when we were talking about recording the kit was muting out the click. And as you can see here on the click track, let's just get that. In fact, first of all, before I get into that, let's just play a little bit of the track. I'm going to mute the click for now. You're just going to see it's kind of a classic rock song. We just got guitar left, guitar right, bass and drums so far. I haven't done any vocals yet, and we have a guitar solo as well at some point, but just have a little listen. Important to say, there's absolutely no plugins on here whatsoever. There's no EQ, there's no compression. Not only are there no plugins here, there was absolutely nothing before going down into Pro Tools. There was no EQ, no compression, there was nothing coming off the desk. All it was recorded through a very nice SSL desk, but with zero in the way of EQ. This is exactly as you hear the microphones. And by the way, there wasn't a lot of care and attention gone into the microphone placement. When I talked about the drum recording and also the guitar recordings previously in the year, I give you the kind of starting points, okay? And microphones can be moved, even little micro adjustments can make a big difference. This was very much, here's where it's a good place to put the kick mic. Here's a good place to put this snare. We went all over that last week. And this was very much the starting position. If you're on a real live session, you'd get your starting position, and then hopefully with a recording assistant, you'd get them to go in the room and just make micro adjustments. Sometimes not micro, sometimes, let's get those overhead mics a lot higher, let's get them lower, let's adjust things. This was very much, we set the microphones up. Because I'm talking and demonstrating at the same time, we don't have the luxury of spending 2 or 3 hours getting the drums and the microphones all peachy. So this is very much the starting points. Now, I hope you agree, straight off the bat, that's not a bad drum sound. That's perfectly workable. Those toms sound great, the kick sounds great. I keep saying it, but if you've got a drummer that has a good kit, can play really well, and knows how to tune it, that's a lot of your work done right there, and as long as you've got some decent microphones on there, that's great. So Solly was playing along to this click, obviously, and one thing I wanted to say last week and forgot to is good practice to, when you know how long the song is and they're playing to a click, it's going to end at the same time every time, okay? Really important to put some automation on there to stop the click ringing over. You still hear it on old records. Even now, you'll get to the end of the song and you can hear the click bleeding through the drummer's headphones. So the song will finish, and you can just hear this decent click as the cymbals are dying, and it's really annoying. So always put some automation on your click. So let's put that on. I'll just go back a little bit. And the click dies, and that's what we want. So just a little top tip there, automate your click. By the way, like I said, Solly had never heard this song. He only played it 2 or 3 times maximum. There's still some rough edges around there. Please don't make any opinions about his drum fills and stuff like that might be off time. But that said, he did a remarkable job. Let's get the mixing board back up again, because I want to have a talk about panning. Now, it might seem quite obvious, but it's worth going over. Let's get the little graphic up. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So here's a photograph of a drum kit. And what I want you to imagine, this pink line here, draw a line through the middle of the snare and roughly this middle part of the kick drum there. And that's kind of how you want to make your panning decisions on a kit, okay? So in reality, you'd kind of have to really just rotate this. Oh God, no, not that much. No, I can't do it slightly. I'd really like to kind of rotate that so that pink line was straight up, but always kick down the middle, snare down the middle. Okay, now if we look at this line, if we take the decision to put our overhead mics hard left and half right, and again, this is how I pan it. If I was panning this kit, I would imagine myself sat there. For many, many people, they take the 180-degree flip on that and they want to pan it as though they were an audience member watching the drummer play. It's equally fine. There's no right or wrong. This is just what I'm used to, and I get confused if I do it any other way. So these pans you see here, not necessarily for the overhead, for the hi-hat, but for the overheads, hard left here, hard right there. It's not always the case that you do that. Again, you've always got to use your ears. If, depending how the kit was recorded, if it just sounds like there's a gap in the middle, maybe you want to bring them in. And that's another reason why we use XY microphones as well. It tends to not leave so much of a gap. But space pairs tend to be pretty much a standard way of recording. If you're finding a big hole in the middle, then just bring them in slightly. But it's not uncommon to do hard left, hard right on the overheads. Now, here's the thing. If you imagine that pink line was standing straight up, then that first tom, we'd maybe pan it 20%. So let's do that. So tom 1, let's just bring him over there a bit, So obviously hard left would be 100. So I'm going to go, it doesn't have to be rocket science, 21 is fine. I'm not going to get the tape measure out. If we're imagining that, maybe we'd pan this tom round to 60. That's pretty much a good starting point. Maybe a little bit less. If we're feeling there's too much discrepancy between tom 1 and tom 2, maybe we'd bring it in. Let's go 50. It's not a science. Somewhere like that, I'm cool with that. Sometimes you would have another mounted tom here, so you go 20 on the left, 20 on the right. And sometimes you'd have 2 floor toms, so maybe you'd go 50 and 70, something like that. Don't get too bogged down in it. At the end of the day, use your ears and make your judgment on that as to what sounds good. I'm going to hard pan these now. Okay, so let's have a listen to how these sound. Just to point out on Pro Tools, I know some of you use Logic and Ableton and all the rest of it, but I'm going to show you just some shortcuts. It might be useful for some of you, it might not be. If we click on the first track, in fact, let me just undo these. Let me just show you what I mean. If, for example, I just want to solo the drums and leave the guitars and the bass and everything out, if I click on the first track, the kick track, hold down the Shift key, and hit the last track, which is an orgs track. I've subgrouped the drums here. I'll show you that again. I'll go over that. I'll reverse that and show you. Anyway, I've highlighted all the drum tracks. If we now hold Shift and Option whilst pressing the solo button, we only solo the drums. Sounding pretty good. Great. Oh, by the way, I just want to point out that you'll notice this trim on here where I've actually pulled down the volume that's going on the master bus. This is purely, if if the music was playing, you wouldn't be able to hear my speaking microphone here. So that's just the only reason that's there. Don't think that you have to put a trim on there or I'm doing some kind of secret thing that I'm not telling you about. Okay, let's have a look at gating. Now, what I want to do is just highlight these toms and have a listen to them. Now, what you can hear there, as Solly's hammering the drum kit, the toms are vibrating in sympathy. And quite often you can get a really nasty rumble going on. It's not too bad on this. There's an actual tom hit. Okay. Quite often it's the low tom. It's really not bad at all. In some recordings that you get, the kit is just humming away. And as the drummer is playing, particularly if the drummer is on some kind of a staging, the whole kit resonates quite a lot. And as the kick and the snare are playing and all the rest of it, particularly the lower toms can just be humming away, going ooh. And as you probably know, if you've ever mixed, getting your low end of your mix sorted out is one of the hardest parts of mixing. So we want to clean it up as much as we possibly can. Now, these days, a lot of people will actually strip the silence, i.e. strip away the bit, physically remove it until there's a tom hit. Okay, oh, I had the wrong one soloed there. Okay, you get the idea. But I think it's important to learn how to use a gate because they're still useful. So what we're going to do is let's have a listen to tom number 1. And we're going to go to Avid and we're going to find the gate, which is that one. Okay, so the idea here, obviously the gate closes when it's above a certain threshold. So let's have a little play. If I pull this down, we can hear that the tom vibrating. As I turn this up, it starts eating into it. That would be no good because that would be annoying. Okay, all we want is the gate to open when that tom hits. Okay, that little bit won't make a difference. We want a nice quick attack on drums. And we also want the gate to hold itself open for a little bit so that we can hear the decay of the drum. So let's find a bit where there's some tom action going on. Let's have a look here. So it's got multiple tom hits there. If you want to zoom in on Pro Tools, it's R and T. Okay, I'm just going to hold the release a little bit. Elongate the release, I should say. So we hear the decay of that drum. If I turn that all the way up, you'll see the difference. Still open. And it takes 4 seconds to close, okay? But that's no good for what we want, so use your ears all the time. Use your ears. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. The hole's good. That's set up pretty well. And just for purposes of brevity, I'm just going to copy those settings over here. So let's have a listen to those two toms. Okay, I suspect this one needs a bit more on the threshold. Okay. But again, if we unsolo it, it's just cleaning up away all the flubby stuff out of your mix. Really, really important. Just going to bypass those for a sec. And I'm going to show you the other option of strip silence. Now, different DAWs have a different method of doing this. And in Pro Tools, what we're going to do, we're going to highlight Tom 1 and go up to Edit, Strip Silence. As you can see, the keyboard shortcut is Command U. And this little box pops up here. Ooh, that's set up really nicely. You can see here it's highlighted these little white boxes here where it thinks that we need to make the cut. In other words, all that stuff before is going to go. This is probably because I was having a little practice before. Normally it will look more like this. I'm going to raise the threshold level until these boxes appear here. Minimum strip duration, so you can have a really short one or you can elongate it. Again, that was a little bit like the hold on the noise gate. And the start pad, that is to move it backwards from, let's take this tom hit. If I move the start pad up, it's just giving us a little bit of breathing space beforehand. And equally so for the end pad, we just want it to, we want to hear the decay of that that drum. So let's get it. You're going to get some falsies showing up every now and then, but this looks pretty good. Yeah, there's a false one there. There's a false one there. That's just where he's hit the snare really, really loudly and it's triggering this strip silence. But regardless, I'm going to strip and lo and behold, it looks a hell of a lot cleaner now. Let's just solo this just to hear this little chunk. Yeah, you can hear it's just the snare, it's not a tom. You can tell really by the waveforms as well. Yes, it could be a gentle little tom hit, but I know because of this song and how he played it that it's unlikely to be a tom hit. Yeah, that can go and that can go. Okay. The rest are hits. Let's get rid of that little thing there. And let's do the same thing to tom number 2. This isn't quite as apparent, so let's have a little play. Again, I'm going to go for roughly the same kind of thing. For the purposes of this lecture, I'm not going to go over this with a fine-tooth comb. You would if you were obviously working on a project. Yeah, that's great. That is a tom hit. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Yeah, okay. So that's another way of ensuring that we don't get this humming business going. Let's put it over here. Maybe we'll bring up that low tom a little bit. Very nice. So let's have a look at drum replacement, drum enhancement via using samples. Now, there are various pieces of software that will convert audio to MIDI. I think Melodyne does it. I've never used it. I know certain DAWs, I believe Logic, you can literally drag an audio file to a MIDI track and it will create a MIDI track for you, a MIDI file for you. Now, these are okay and they work pretty well. But if you're really going to town on a project, I would strongly urge you to get a little bit manual with it. And so I'm going to show you how we go about that in Pro Tools. So what I'm going to do, let's convert this kick track here to MIDI. So I'm going to click on the kick track and I'm going to right click for a new track, however you want to set up your new track, whichever way you use it, and I'm going to set up a MIDI track. Okay, there we go. Let's just extend this a little bit. Now, there are various products out there, such as Steven Slate Trigger, for example, that you wouldn't need to create a MIDI track. Let me just see whether I can get this running up for you. Steven Slate Trigger, there we go. Let's have a look at that. So with this, you would choose some kind of a kick drum. I don't really use this an awful lot, so I'm not quite sure how they sound, but okay. So now what happens is, on this interface, let me solo the kick, it's going to listen to the audio, and again, using kind of gating technology and using this detail button here and the sensitivity and all that kind of thing, similar to a gate, it's going to recognize what's a kick drum hit and what's not. And if it designates it as being a kick drum hit, it's going to fire off these samples, which we can kind of mix to our taste. So let's see how this works. Yeah, pretty good. Now that's with mix at 100. If I turn mix down to 0, that's Solly's original kick. Okay, maybe we decide to turn the overheads down, the room mic, and just have it a little bit more. That's pretty good. Or you can blend to any degree a mixture of the recorded kit and the trigger. It's actually a pretty cool way of doing things, that, the Stephen Slate trigger. But I really like using Toontrack, either Easy Drums or Superior Drums. They're great. Really like them. But there's tons of other companies out there, such as Addictive Drums. I know a lot of people swear by them. There's tons of them out there. But in order to get into one of those kind of packages, you're looking at converting your audio to MIDI, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's grab the pencil tool here and just get this going. Rocking on. Kick drums are normally found on C1 in most drum software. So I'm going to do that. And what I'm going to do is bring it to sample level, okay, so that we get this lined up nice and tightly. So I'm gradually zooming in using the T button on my keyboard. Okay, that is pure sample level there. This is moving it one sample at a time. So we get that nicely lined up like that. Doesn't have to be quite so long. It just needs to be a tiny little MIDI blip. I'm now going to take this from notes to clips, okay, and I'm going to tighten this up as well. Let's get it right in, right into the sample, lovely, and let's shorten it at this end as well. Doesn't have to be so precise. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that. And by the way, you see this little yellow highlight here? That's called your key focus. You can have it focused here. You can have it focused here, and there's another one you can focus on here, your files. I'm not going to get stuck in this because this is not a Pro Tools demonstration, but as shortcuts come along the way, I'll tell you about them. If the keyboard focus is in this edit screen, there's certain things you can do. For example, normally on a Mac, you would Command C to copy something. Well, when the key focus is there, all you have to do is go C. So I've highlighted this MIDI note and I've hit C just to put that in the memory, okay? Now what I'm going to do is holding down the Shift key with the MIDI track selected, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on Kick, and I'm going to form a group called MIDI Kick. Okay. Now, really important now that we make sure Tab to Transients is highlighted blue. And what this means is, let's put the cursor just somewhere there. Every time I hit my Tab button on the keyboard, it's going to find the nearest transient, okay? I'm going to hit it again. And it sees a little bit more of a transient, but obviously it's seeing a bit of a ghost of the snare. Now, I know this seems a little bit long-winded, but now I've found this second kick drum hit, now it's found that, I'm going to paste that MIDI blip that I just copied. And all I have to do with that keyboard focus on is hit the button V. And there we go. It's pasted it. So just using one finger on the Tab button, I'm going to find the next hit. And I'm going to hit V again with one finger. So you're literally just using two fingers for this. Okay. You do have to keep scrolling along. And let's suppose you go past one like that. If you hold Option tab, it goes backwards. Okay. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is really long-winded, and perhaps it is. Okay, I've gone back over it while I was talking to you. But I can tell you, I did this whole song before. It's a 3.5-minute song, and it took me just less than 10 minutes to copy the kick drum. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to now delete this MIDI track here. And I'm going to bring in the ones that I did before, all the way through the song. So that was, about 9 and a bit minutes of editing to do that. Same on the snare. There's the snare midis here. And I also did the toms as well. But because I stripped the silence, it was a lot quicker. This is literally done in seconds. So there's the MIDI track for tom number 1. And here's the MIDI track for tom number 2 here. Okay. Now, some people might want to put all the MIDI tracks together, kick, snare, tom 1, tom 2, whichever way you want to do it is perfectly fine. Okay, so now what we need to do is we've got those MIDI tracks. The kick is on C1, the snare is on D1, and the toms are... that's a good question. What are the toms? Toms typically, there we go, we have a... Oh, I'm not sure that's in the right place there. Well, we're here. Oh, no, because it's a high tom, yeah. So that's going for something like a B2, something like that. But anyway, I'm not going to get too bogged down on that. What we need to do is instantiate a stereo version of an instrument track. And I'm going to put this right at the top of my project, and let's use Superior Drums. I'm now going to go to Tune Track and choose Superior Drummer. Here we go. That's going to load up, and here it is. It's a great program, this. Loads of different packages. This is the Eddie Kramer one. It's really nice. Eddie Kramer recorded Led Zeppelin. Jimi Hendrix is a total legend. And this is actually one of the John Bonham kits, this Perspex kit, and he was very renowned for using this kit. It's a great sounding kit. But in actual fact, I am going to use an Easy Drummer kit for you here. So this works with the much cheaper program Easy Drummer, and I really like this prog rock kit. Don't let the word prog rock push you off, if you're not into Yes and Genesis and all that kind of stuff. It's just a great sounding kit. I think it's a Yamaha, but I'm not 100% sure. It's just got a really nice fat kick, but it's got that high-end transient there of the beta hitting the skin. Really like that. Snare's great. Nice and beefy. Toms sound great. Okay, fab. So that set that up. Let's come back to our kit now. Our kick here, MIDI kick. Currently the output is set to none. And I'm going to set it to Superior Drummer channel number 1. Let's see if this works. Oops. No, it doesn't, because I also need to solo the Superior Drummer. Okay. Let's bring in Solly's kick drum that we recorded. Okay, now what I can do is move to the mixer on Superior Drummer and pull down the kick drum there. This is a bit like the mix button in the Stephen Slate. Now, one thing to bear in mind is they do have mic bleed here, so pay attention as well to the overheads, because we're getting a lot of kick overhead, which you may or may not want. Now, I suspect for this particular song, I probably want it a little bit of a tighter sound and not quite so roomy. Let's just turn that off for now. So again, if I pull this kick fader down, we're having Solly's original kick that we recorded at uni. And we can just enhance it with this. Important to bear in mind as well, let me just stop there. Don't make the sample too far away from, particularly if you're just tucking the samples underneath and you're not using drum replacement. Choose a sound that's very similar to the one that you recorded, because otherwise you're just going to get this very strange layer. It is a fact that people do layer up samples. It's not unheard of. You might have seen on the Stephen Slate, there was probably 6 or 7 different drum samples on there. But it's good form if you're using the original recording. Make sure that it's tuned to the same note, because otherwise it's just going to pull in a few different directions. And this sounds remarkably similar. So again, solid dry. And now Superior Drummer, bring it in. So it's just bringing it a little bit more forward. I quite like that. Okay, so let's have a listen to the snare as well. So let's solo the snare. Oops, snare MIDI, and also send it out to Superior Drummer Channel 1. Now I've got to make sure that this faders back up again. And there we go. Again, if you wanted some overhead in there. Ooh, quite nice. Nice room. Again, these sample libraries, they record the drums in studios, like really, really killer studios with fantastic equipment, fantastic microphones, great sounding rooms, great engineers, producers, drummers, all the rest of it. So you're getting some really, really good stuff. And the other important thing to note is it won't play the same drum sample one after the other, because a drummer will naturally hit slightly differently with every single hit, and just to a minute detail, each hit of a drum will sound very slightly different. And whilst that might seem like a little bit of overkill, in actual fact, it really does help having a natural drum sound. You know, you can get a machine gun effect when everything is the same kind of level. It can just sound what's known as a machine gun effect. Some of these sample libraries are huge. That Eddie Kramer one that I showed you, I think, was about 20 gigabytes of sounds. Just incredible lengths that they go to and the detail they get. So that's by the by. So here we go, we've got some nice overhead stuff happening there. Let's hear the kicks in there as well. And our original kick, of course. Okay, this is Solly's original. Take out the overheads of Superior. Let's bring in some sample snare. So we're getting a bit more snap on there, it's quite nice, I like that. Yeah, just a bit of overhead there. Cool. We've got our snare bottom. Let's get onto that in a sec. So the other thing that I need to figure out is sending the toms over to Superior. So let's get tom 1 here. I'm going to get rid of that. So we are going from tom 1 MIDI, we're going to Superior Channel 1. Let's have a listen. Do we get any toms? Let's turn the tom fader up. Let's find a little tom section. That'll do. Okay. So currently, not triggering, because I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to solo safe this. So by holding down the command button on the Superior solo, it means I don't have to keep thinking about it. It's what we call solo safe. So if I, for example, solo the snare MIDI, we're still going to get the Superior snare coming through. Okay. And so let's have a look at the tom. Great. Okay. Oops. Tom 1 MIDI is what I want. And there it is. Cool. And let's have tom 2 MIDI, and we're also going to send that out to Superior. I actually don't think there's any tom 2 on there, actually, but I'm not going to get bogged down in every little detail of this for the purposes of the lectures. So let's have a little listen from the top. let's mute the superior drums. Okay, sounding pretty good. And again, at this point, we've not even put any EQ on at all. So this is starting to sound really, really good. So we've got a good natural recording. We've not even got into any EQ or compression, anything like this at this point. We've either gated or stripped the silence. We've panned everything where we want it. You know, most of the time when you're mixing, mix engineers used to be known as balancing engineers, and that's a large part of it. Let's get things balanced before we even think about compressing and EQing stuff. So I've been talking about EQ. Let's have a little listen to some of the things we have to be aware of with EQ. Now, before we get into putting a single EQ plugin on our session, let's have a little think about what we're after. Well, obviously this isn't metal, but it's still quite an aggressive rock track. And really we want the drums to be a nice foundation for that. Just going to play the track again. I'm probably going to make the bass a little bit more aggressive, maybe put some kind of a distortion on there, something like that. Which one? Yeah, Sansam's pretty cool. Because this will kind of have a bearing on how I mix the drums as well. I know I'm picking. Let's take that down. I'm not going to get into putting compression and stuff on the bass just yet. Okay, I would have absolutely recorded the kick drum with the NS10 sub microphone on there. I don't know why it's not there, but in any case, it's not there. So I'm going to show you a little plugin that's actually free. So if nothing else with this lecture, this is a great little top tip for you. Go to bosdigitallabs.com and get Bark of the Dog. It's a psychoacoustic plugin, giving you that lower end. It's like a perceived low end without actually boosting all that EQ. It puts in different octaves of the frequency, and it just tricks the ears into thinking that there's more low end than there is. And again, because I don't have access to that NS10 microphone anymore, what we can do is put the Boz Bark of the Dog on. Here it is. Ah, damn it. Just give me a minute. Give me a minute just to get my serial number on this. We're now up and running. So here it is. Boz Digital Labs, Bark of the Dog. I don't use it all that often, so it's just a little bit of... I'm just going to have a little click around and see what we can do. So let's refresh ourselves what the kick drum sounds like. This is the recorded kick drum with no superior drums underneath. It's just as it was on the Beta 52 microphone. Okay. Now, let's just bring up the boost to 80 Hertz. Maybe make it lower. Oh. So that's the kind of territory that you get with an NS10 speaker. You can totally overdo this because it sounds so cool on its own, but you can rapidly find by the end of the mix you just got such a massive honking, stonking low end. There's bypass. There's with this sub. I'm probably doing too much. Let's bring Superior Drummer into play as well. Not sure about that room. Now all of a sudden we're superior. Now I'm kind of losing a bit of that low end. I'll bring up a bit more. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Nice weighty kick drum there. So it's a good way of faking that NS10 if you don't have access to one, or you're mixing something for somebody and they didn't have an NS10 on the session. That's a great free plugin, that is. There's all sorts of other ones. UAD do one called Voice of God that you have to pay for. I think it's about 100 quid. In all honesty, I have that one as well, and most of the time I'll use Bark the Dog, and it's free. If you don't know Boz Digital Labs, they do some really, really great plugins. I'm a big fan of their stuff. So again, that's before I've got into putting any EQ across the channel. That's, again, we're balancing things here. So next thing we're probably going to have a look at is, do we EQ before we compress, or do we compress before we EQ? The age-old question. Well, you know, it depends. Use your ears. Basically, most of the time you're going to EQ before compress, and it gives you a slightly fatter sound, a little bit more weight to it. If you EQ after a compressed sound, it can give you a cleaner type of sound. So it really depends, and there's no simple answer to it. You just have to use your ears. But the great thing is, on any DAW, you can just drag them around and experiment. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to just put the EQ before anything. Now, obviously, we've got Bark the Dog on, and to me that's sounding perfectly usable as it is. But what I'd like to do is just draw your attention to some of the frequencies that might be of interest to you when it comes to kick drum, snare drum. We'll go through each one individually. Let's put one of these on for now. Okay, so if we're wanting to get a little bit of oomph in there, 50 to 100k is a pretty good idea. A lot of people will routinely roll off super low end, you know, just to stop any kind of unheard things going on. Again, this is just the kick on its own. And given the fact that we've got Bark of the Dog on there, or we're going to put Bark of the Dog on there, maybe we just roll that off so that if there's any rumble, sometimes in home studios you've got lorries going past outside and they can really rumble past, and you can just attenuate that down a little bit. But in any case, if you want to give a little bit of a low end weight again, if you look somewhere between the 50 to 100 and boost around there, let's just bring that up. I'm going to go to ridiculous degree, okay? Sounds pretty nice though. So that gives you some nice weight. But again, because we're doing Bark of the Dog, I'm not sure we need anything there. That was just choosing around 80. Okay. There's your 100, somewhere around there. A lot of things fight around the 100, so you don't want to go too crazy. The relationship between the kick and the bass drum, the kick and the bass drum, the kick and the bass is really pivotal to getting your low end right on your mixers. So you don't want them competing with each other too much. So you've got to be a little bit careful. If you're getting honkiness, that tends to, in fact, before we do that, the beach ball sound would be the next one up. If I have a little listen, I don't know whether we got it in here, but let's take this one off again. If I boost around 160 to 400, so yeah, this one here, you can get what we call the beach ball sound. Yeah, not really got it. But if you're getting a kind of bouncy boing boing beach ball sound, it's probably going to be somewhere in the 160 to 400 hertz region. So that's something to bear in mind. But again, this was a great sounding kit, a great drummer, great microphones, great studio. It's sounding pretty cool straight out of the box, as it were. So let's have a look at honkiness 1.5. Let's boost that. Yeah, there it is. Now, let's have a word about sweeping EQs. We've all done it, and we all still do it to a certain extent, but you've got to be really careful. And one of the main reasons for that is if you aggressively boost any frequency like this, it's probably going to sound horrible. That sounds horrible, so you're probably going to go, let's cut that out. And what you'll just end up cutting everything, So really, if you're aware of certain danger zones, like I said, on this 1.5, you can get a bit of honkiness. Sweep around there. Yeah, it's kind of honky around there. We can slightly narrow the Q. See, it all sounds horrible. But that's the kind of one there, maybe if we just notch that out a little bit. Don't go too aggressive. You can get away with really, really light things here. And if you want some high end, maybe you just put a bit of a shelf in to get the Lars Ulrich effect. There's quite a lot of attack on there anyway. There it is. Not personally a big fan of that, so in fact, if anything, I might cut that attack down a little bit. Let's put Barker the dog back in. That's flat. That's with both. But of course, you should always listen in context. Let's go back to the beginning. I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's worth pointing out as well. If I just want to tweak the volumes a little bit, we have clip gain in Pro Tools. Most DAWs have this as well. But for example, if we felt that the level of the kick was a little bit low, we can just clip gain it up a little bit. But bear in mind what I was saying about levels, and that's a little bit too hot. So I'm going to turn that back down again. So just to remind you, I'm a big fan of the K scale developed by Bob Katz, mastering engineer. So I always run at K14 scale. And if we get, I'm not too anal about this, but if we get it roughly around the zeros on K14, then I know that all my plugins are going to run at a really good level that they really like. If you're running, let's say, 0 full scale, the plugins don't actually respond so well. So now with that, you can see that it's hovering well below 0, well below. But in any case, if anything, I could probably do with attenuating everything down a little bit. See what's going on here. Yeah, it's right. Click. It's a bit heavy, but that doesn't matter because that's not ending up in the mix. I really like that kick. Okay, so let's have a little look at the snare now. Let's put the same plugin on the snare. EQ7. Frequencies to be aware of. So again, for depth, if you want a nice meaty, deep sounding snare, you're looking around that 100, but again, beware, because we have a lot of stuff working around the 100. Let's grab something more along the lines of this. You can hear how that adds some weight to it. Don't want to go too mad. If your snare's sounding muddy, 350 to 750 are frequencies to have a little look out for. So just getting some of that mid going. But in this case, it's not really sounding muddy, I wouldn't say. If you're getting boxiness, 1K. Let's see if we can induce some boxiness. So somewhere around 1K. I'm not going to... There it is. Slightly wider Q value. So if it was sounding very boxy like that, you might want to cut that a little bit. Okay. And if we want to get some crack on the snare, quite often I'll do this, somewhere between 7.5 to 10K, something like that. Just give it a little bit of a lift, give it a bit of air. I'm going to go over the top. Okay. Send that over there a bit. Before, let's hear it with the samples. Okay, so let's move on to toms. Again, I'm going through this quite quickly. I'm just pointing out, again, the frequencies to beware of. Going over to tom number 1. What am I going to do here? Let's get the same plugin there. So they're not fancy plugins, these. It's just what comes with Pro Tools. If you're wanting to emphasize the attack of a tom, good to look around the 5K region. Let's set this up at 5. Oops, what happened there? Oops, let's just try this. Okay. Solo tom 1. You really hear that attack now. Without, with. Obviously too much. Sometimes just a little boost. Here, just under 3 dB. Without, with. Just, you can hear that stick on there. So that's quite nice sometimes if you really want to have a lot of attack on there. Again, if you want the presence, have a look around the 8 mark, somewhere around there, just lifting that up. But it can be a bit ugly. I like meaty toms, so I'm not going to go for that right now. If you're finding that you need to decrease, let's say, the thickness, if everything's a little bit thick in the low end and your toms are really boomy, have a look around 1.5. That can work wonders. Okay, let's just have a look at this. I'm going to boost it like quite a large degree. Actually, not the case on this one. Not the case on this. 4 to 500 is like your boxiness. Let's have a look what we've got going on there. Just trying to show you what we can get. There's the boxiness, okay. Now, I don't feel that these drums are recorded particularly boxy. They're not sounding it to me. But if it were, you might just cut it. Nice gentle slope. Bypass. You know, maybe we put a little bit of low end in. In fact, because it's not boxy, I'm going to use this one. Da, 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 da. Before, after. Okay, and of course, don't forget we've got the Toontrack samples on there as well. Okay, so that's Tom 1. Let's have a little listen to Tom 2. I'm just going to copy another one down here. And it's kind of the same rules apply really on there. I like nice fat toms on my rock. Maybe I'll give it a little bit more of the high end. Smiley face, can't go wrong. Before, after. Okay, it doesn't really, the toms don't really stick out at that point, but you get an idea of that. Okay, overheads. Let's have a little look at that. I'm just going to copy one of these down here for now. Okay, so really what we're after with overheads is making sure that there's not too much of the low end getting in there. You know, again, it depends on the genre of music. Maybe if you're doing jazz, you want an overall feel for the thing. But again, in this rock, I'm going to be taking out lots of that low end. I don't really want to hear too much of the kick drum in here. Let's just solo this. Okay, I'm going to pan this in the center now so it's not too annoying. Okay, so let's put a steeper slope on. Now you can actually move this quite a way up. You can hear all the low end reducing, but it still retains the sparkle of the cymbals, and that's what we're after. I'm going to go crazy now, okay? Now obviously that sounds horrible. And don't be afraid to not use your hi-hat mic. Frequently, if the drummer's smacking away on the hi-hat mic, on the hi-hat, you don't actually need the hi-hat microphone in, and you're solely reliant on the overheads here. So, you know, that might have a bearing. So listen as a whole, you don't want the hi-hats to disappear. I'm going to pan this back where it was. Okay, and what can be quite nice as well on the overheads is just to induce a little bit of nice high end there. So, you know, again, 7 or 8, something like that. Add a bit of air and sparkle. You can totally overdo it. It's quite nice. I'm just going to copy this one over to the other side as well. A little bit over the top. Let's see what it's like totally taking out the hi-hat. That's just the bit where it doesn't play the hi-hat. Here it is. We can still hear it. I've hardly got them on there. Depends what kind of vibe you're after, if you really want to shush them away. It's on the top cymbals a lot there. Here we go. Right, a little bit over the top. I'm actually actually working with headphones at the moment, so the music doesn't come over my vocal microphone, and I am not used to using headphones, so making mix decisions for me is quite strange using these, because it all sounds a bit weird in my headphones. So let's have a little look at compression. I don't want to get too bogged down on this, because there are some fantastic videos. I know I keep saying this, but people like Rick Beato, Warren Hewitt, they're just so great. The stuff they give out for free, honestly, it is so good. So with their YouTube channels and their high value productions that they do, they can go into details more than I can really here in the scope of this limited amount of time, and a general overview as we're doing. So compressing, really, there's some producers, engineers that actually aren't keen on compression. Bruce Swedian, for one, Michael Jackson producer, not a huge fan. Certainly not recording it going in, and that's something I never ever do anymore. I used to back in the day when we were recording to tape. But you know, with all things, it's about being gentle until it comes to the overheads, which I'm going to talk about. But it's a way, particularly if you had an inconsistent drummer, which Solly is not. If, for example, their kick drums are all over the place, they're quiet, they're loud, it's just a way of smoothing things out. Now, typically, if we were to put a compressor on a kick drum, for example, we do not want a particularly quick attack on there. So somewhere around 30 milliseconds is ideal, because we don't want to get rid of that initial attack of the drums. We want to hear it. If you've got a really super quick attack rate, 1 millisecond, let's say, it's going to clamp down on that transient straight away. And then your drums can just sound really flubby and horrible. If you're after a particular effect, then, you know, maybe you want to do that. But generally speaking, you'd go for a slow attack, something like this. Let's see how it sounds. Let's solo the kick. Again, we're not hearing superior at all here. 3-to-1 ratio is pretty much perfect. Okay, but that threshold's a bit high. It's really, it's too much. If I go over the top, listen, it disappears. Sometimes just attenuating a dB or two is all it takes. And by the way, don't be afraid of using more than one compressor. So it is a thing where you might have this compressor going into a more flavoured compressor. I've got that working very gently, and maybe we pull up another one, maybe something with a bit more mojo. Plug-in Alliance do some great stuff, something like this, you know, and maybe we'll get this one working gently as well. Let's see what we can do here. I can't help myself. You know what? This actually gives it a bit of weight. It's a little bit of a tone shape of this, because it's emulating a valve limiter, I believe. I'm pretty sure the Acme is valve. Could be wrong. Let's put that on a slow one as well. Okay, so we've got a bit of tone shaping going on as well. Same with snare. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of over compressing snares. I like organic. That's just how I roll. But again, it depends what you're mixing. Let's have a little look here. 3-to-1 ratio is a really good starting point. Then I'm going to go mad. You do hear that effect where it really clamps down, actually. Some people do use that for a particular effect. Let me take the attack right up. And what you can do when you increase the attack is the drummer hits the snare, you still get the initial attack of the stick hitting the skin. But what it can allow, if you've got a nice long release, is for the shell of the drum to come through. Normally that would disappear, and what we're doing is we're now pulling up the volume of the bit that happens after the attack. Before, after. We're still getting rid of too much of that attack, so again, turn the threshold, just gentle compression. Not even doing anything there. Sometimes that's what you want. Okay, starting to sound great. Now, you'll hear a lot of talk, and possibly some of you have even tried parallel compression. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to tell you about was subgrouping your drums. Again, a lot of you will know about this, but some will not. So everything that's going to a drum bus at the moment, I'm now going to put that to be just standard A1 and 2, which is my master outputs. Okay, and I'm going to delete this subtrack here, just so that I can show you how we go about that process. Right. So again, see, some people like to put these subgroups at the end. So, you know, maybe you'll have your effects and then your subgroups, or vice versa. It's however you want to do it. A lot of people will pick the last microphone in the chain and put the subgroup there. It's just how you roll. And we want a stereo AUX input. One instance of a stereo AUX input. Now, we have to name it so things don't get confusing. And we have to give it an input. And your input will be on a bus channel, okay? I've probably got one named already, which it is indeed. So let's use drum bus. Now, again, using the technique that I was talking about before, if we highlight the kick, it will totally ignore the, or will it actually? I think it will ignore the superior drums. Anyway, obviously it will ignore the MIDI. I'm going to click up to room, holding down the shift and the option. Instead of it going to A1 and 2, I'm going to send it to bus, drum bus. And there we go, making sure that I haven't put anything there that doesn't want to, like the guitars and the bass and so on. So here we go. There we are. We're back into the... So I can mute the drums in one fell swoop. But we're still hearing the superior. Okay, now you've seen me put compression on individual tracks. You'll have heard a lot about parallel compression. It's so funny. I've got so many plugins, all legitimate, I might add. There's no cracked things on this computer at all. And I could only find one compressor that had a mix control to do parallel compression in the plugin, and that was a Softube Drawmer, which is not a compressor that I would ordinarily go for. But what you can do with parallel compression is like dramatically over compress, so it clamps down. We actually perhaps go for an effect where it actually does clamp down on all those transients. We've got the transients from all the individual channels, but what we can do is clamp on those with the compressor and then up all the kind of room sounds and the bit that comes after the transient, and it can give you a really nice larger than life sound. Listen to any Led Zeppelin record. So here we go. Here's where the magic happens. If I have this on dry, let's just go for a punch setting. I'm going to in fact, I'm going to set it to wet, and I'm going to totally overdo it, okay? Let's just get rid of these for a sec. Just want to go crazy with it for now. Okay. This wouldn't ordinarily be my go-to compressor, although it sounds pretty good. So that is completely wet, but we can back it down to be completely dry, okay? And mix any amount in between. Can you hear it sucking there? Too much. Now that makes a definite difference there. So I'm bypassing here. This is the mics in the studio with Superior Drummer, by the way. But if I now engage the effect, dry with boost. Let's make it a bit wetter. Too sucky. Don't like it. You can so go over the top with this. Let's hear it in context. Oop. We don't want that. I'm not sure whether this is working on here particularly. But in any case, to show you what can you do if you don't have one of those compressors that has got the mix control. What you can do is duplicate this channel here. Dun, 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 just accept everything. So we now got two instances of the same sub. And maybe we call this Crush or Drums Crush, whatever you want to call it. And pick a compressor with lots of flavour. Valve compressors work really nicely on this. I'm going to choose something like the old Fairchild. Okay, so now what we got is one sub channel that is dry, and we're going to have one that's completely wet and over the top. Oh, instantly. Oh, do you know what? That's the danger of it. You turn it on and you go, oh, that's leapt out. That sounds great. It's so instantly gratifying. It's tempting to leave it in, but it's really over the top. So that's off. Fade it down. Let's bring it in. Bypass. Oh, hurt me. You'll notice this is flagging up as orange. It's starting to go into overload territory, but you use your ears. Does it sound any good? Yes. Bypass. Oh my goodness. I've probably gone over the top. Wherever you think it should be, just bring it down from there. Not a bad rule. Didn't really talk too much about the snare bottom mic. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with these, actually. Let's put these drum subs into solo safe mode. So if I solo any one of the drums, we're still going to hear it. You get that rattle. Let's hear it in context. Always hear it in context, because the snare bottom mics just sound trashy and horrible on their own. Sounds pretty good. Okay, I guess the final thing to talk about in this general overview of mixing drums, again, this is very much starter points here. I'm not going into any great detail. Go and see Rick Beato, Warren Hewitt, or any number of guys online. Some are better than others, but with Warren and Rick, you cannot go wrong. Honestly, everything they give is golden, and it's, you know, although they have paid for accounts and stuff, the stuff you get for free is just incredible. So again, depends what you're after. I'm going to set up this. Oh, we've already set up a reverb channel. I'll tell you what's really nice is Ocean Way on the Universal Audio platform. Let's bring in Ocean Way. This is nice because Ocean Way Studio is very, very expensive studio in Los Angeles, and we can place our drums within here. And there's a way that you can, I'm not going to get into this right now, maybe I'll do it in another mix session, but because I've put this on a reverb channel, let's set reverb rather than remiking. I could, if I want, put this as a serial plug-in on, let's say, the snare drum, something like that, and actually remic it as well and put it in the Ocean Way studio room. It sounds fantastic. It's really, really lovely. And there are different companies that do these kind of things as well. There's a nice one by Eventide. I think it's called T-Reverb or something like that. But anyway, it's the studio, the Hansa Studios in Germany where David Bowie recorded Heroes. And you can literally put your vocalist in that studio and it just sounds great. So for now, because I'm doing this as a send on an AUX channel, I'm going to set this to reverb, okay? And it's set up to go in on the rev bus. So let's send some reverb there. Where's the rev bus? This might be from Days Gone By. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reconfigure that one to be, let's call it 3536, and I'm going to rename it Rev Drums. Okay, let's go back to snare. We're going to send now to that bus. There it is. Okay, so let's play. Too much now, but maybe we want to put the toms through there as well. Tom's a bit loud. Okay, so you get the idea. We've all put reverb on stuff before, so I'm not going to get too bogged down in that either. Do bear in mind, by the way, that what some people do is we're using the Toontrack Superior Drum samples as well, which are currently dry, and that is quite a thing. I can't remember which mix engineer does this, but there is a mix engineer that actually sets up a white noise sample on each snare drum hit and sends the white noise sample to the reverb. So you get this shh, shh. It's quite interesting. You can get really, really creative with it. But what I also wanted to say is if you desperately wanted to, for example, put reverb on the snare output of your drum samples, you can do it by sending to a bus output. So these, again, I'm just specifically talking about Toontrack, Superior Drummer and Easy Drummer working in exactly the same way. They normally default to out 1 and 2. I'm now going to put 3, 4. You might have the toms 5, 6 if you want, okay? And then what you can do is click on Superior here. I'm going to right click and set up a new stereo AUX track so it sits next to our sample drums, okay? And I'm going to call this Superior Snare, okay? The input is critical now. So let's click on this. The interface, obviously, that's all my microphones and my virtual inputs and so on. Bus, that's how we feed reverbs, as we just saw. But now Pro Tools knows that there's a plugin bus that's been set up, and there's Superior Drummer. And I'm going to choose 3 and 4 because that's what I set up here within Superior Drummer's mixing desk. So I've got the snare firing off from the MIDI here. Let's solo that. But now, if I solo this Superior channel, we should hear just the snare. Oh, thank goodness. So what that means is we can now, if we want to, send that sampled snare out to the reverb of the drums. Okay. There it goes. Okay. Maybe if I turn up the Superior Drummer snare, we'll hear that reverb a bit more. There it is. And just mix to taste. Okay, there's one final thing I want to draw your attention to, because I noticed when he was hitting the snares there. The old machine gun effect. So I'm going to zoom in on this little bit here. Let's have a look. Now, it's the MIDI that I want. And I've already done this. Okay, so quite often, let's have a look. These will all be the same volume. I'm just going to put them all full, okay? And I'm going to show you what this machine gun effect is like. Let's just solo this. Actually, I want to take the reverb off as well. Would have been helpful if I'd have shown this before. Let's have that and turn off that. Okay, we have a machine gun situation. There's no dynamics there. If you look at Solly's audio here, he starts very quiet and it gets louder and louder. Okay, so we need to induce that in the samples. This is another reason when you're going through, I was doing that tab to transients thing. These are the kind of things you can look at when you do things manually. If you use software to convert audio to MIDI, you might not necessarily notice this. So just very quickly, if we come to this tool here in the MIDI window, this pencil here, it could well default to the free, but we want line, okay? And what we're going to do is we're just going to draw a line going from quiet to loud. So you can see the ramps of the velocity here. Let's have a listen. Let's see if that's any better. That's great. And again, because they sample such a lot, it's not the same drum samples triggering. Superior will know to play that quiet sample. A drummer hits and the drum sounds in a very different way when tickled. It's not just a volume issue. So I've drawn in the automation here, and that will be firing off different samples. So let's just check that bit out in situ. And we get the build-up of the snare, and that's really nice. So as I say, this has been a very general overview. I hope you've got something out of this. Please feel free to get in touch with me with any things that you're not sure of anything you've seen in the video. But I really hope you got something out of it. And please, I long for the day when we can get together face to face and do this a little bit more hands-on. Anyway, have a great day. Speak to you soon.